All right. So for the remainder of the morning, we'll run through some time series, and then Chris will do a session on loading generic data and the various ways to do that. Right. Okay. So let's talk about time series, or more generally, data set series, right? So let's take a moment to consider that I defined a data set as a thing that you load once. The data that you contain that you load all at once, one snapshot or something like that, right? But it's quite frequent that we want to do operations relating to multiple data sets, right? So for example, you probably will have some sort of analysis pipeline or a set of analysis that's uniform that you want to do efficiently on multiple data sets. This is an opportunity for embarrassingly parallel operations. Because by definition, most of the analysis you can probably conceive of that will happen one data set at a time can be completely independent. Probably a rare few examples where the result of the first step will be used in the second step, right? Another reason is like if you have a large simulation or a large collection of data sets, sort of in the way that I've defined that word, then it may not be clear what is the data set of interest that you want. And you maybe want some ways to find that other than just sort of poking around manually until you get the right one, and then you write it down and say it's always data set 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. So YT has a bit of functionality to help with that in the form of something called the dataset series, right? So a dataset series is an object. It's sort of considered a superclass of a time series. So we don't need to lock ourselves into time being the dimension. This can be a collection of data sets, right, from, say, multiple simulations. I should actually stop and say, just for a moment, that I added one extra file for this example. So I'm going to use the examples in the primordial star directory. And if you go to the YT Hub, into the collections, YT Workshop 2025, in primordial star, I added an extra file, this thing down here at the bottom called gas plus dml3.enzo. This is the parameter file that I use to run this simulation. So I would get that as well. You can just click on this little download thing there and grab it. It's a small text file, so it should get instantly. Put that in the same directory, the primordial star data, if you want to do that. So, okay, get back to this. So let's run through a simple way that we might use this data set series first, okay? I'll import YT and say you know exactly a set of files that you want, a set of data sets in a folder. I'm going to name them explicitly here. I'm going to do the simplest thing first. Right. And then I will create a dataset series object basically as a list of file names. And all I'm doing in here is a little bit of simple list comprehension where I'm taking all of these file names, DD96, 118, 130, 140, 157, and I'm adding the data path with this os.path.join, right? So we do that, and now we have one thing that sort of knows about this whole collection, right? And the simplest thing that we could do, of course, is then we can loop over them all manually, right? I'm just going to do that here and print out the time. And there they go, right? And that shouldn't be surprising. The one thing, of course, that wasn't obvious is that you can simply iterate over this time series TS object. So you can say for DS in TS, and simply loop over them all, and it will load them one at a time. I mean, that's fine. We've really only not had to do yt.load, right? There's nothing stopping you from getting a list of file names and doing a for loop and saying for yt, ds equals yt.load this file name, right? But another nice thing that we can do, of course, is, if you don't want to list if you don't have just 4 data sets, maybe you have 100 or 1,000 or something, we can use wildcards. So terminal wildcards like star and question mark, and we can add them all at once with load. So not creating a time series or a data series object explicitly, but using the all-purpose yt.load command, right? So now when I do that, it's just going to do basically nothing. And this is really what we want. We always want the initial steps to be fairly cheap, right? And then that can be operated on in the same way that I showed in the previous example. We can do for DS and TS. But one of the other things that we can do, of course, I said, if you have all of these data sets and you want to perform a uniform analysis, you might want to parallelize that and have one processor or a group of processors operating independently on each one, so you don't have to wait for them all to execute in serial. For that, we can add in the iteration for DS and TS, we can add this .p iter, stands for parallel iteration. And then if we are running this in parallel, and this afternoon we will talk about how to run YT in parallel. So I'm going to kind of skip over that. But then if we do this, each one of these iterations will be executed on an independent processor using MPI parallelism. So this will work on a cluster across multiple nodes, not just, shared memory on a single node. Talk a lot more about many other things you can do with YT's parallelism this afternoon. But there's other things that we can do, right? So I mentioned you may load in this giant collection of data, but you say, really what I want is the cosmological data set at redshift 1, or, it in some non-cosmological set at some specific time. So that the data set series object comes with these 2 handy functions, get by time and get by redshift. These will link to the documentation for each of those. That will then go through and find the best one that matches this. And there are additional keywords to say default to above or below or how close to get, so on and so forth, right? So I can do that and it will quickly go through them and find the one I want. We should probably change it so it does this quietly. Yeah. Matt says no. I'm sorry, Matt says no, we can't do it. That's how it works around here.
Not how it works.
And to this, right? So then I've called this ds equals ts.getByTime for the data set closest to 123.4 megayears after the Big Bang, or in whatever time we have, right? And it's given me that ds. And I can say ds.current time, and it's 123.38. So pretty darn close, right? And there's no reason we can't implement more of these to get various other unique attributes of data, right?
Can you make it do like Price is Right rules?
You can make it do Price is Right rules, right? So I forgot.
Price is Right rule? Closest without going over.
Closest without going over, right? Yes, there's a keyword.
Yeah. Low side.
There's a keyword to get by time,
okay,
to say go on the low side as
okay,
opposed to on the high side.
Then the wall that it should be implemented on the pull request.
Oh,
Yeah.
huh.
So the last thing I want to show in this short little section is that for a subset of data, we can do something even a little bit more clever. This is mainly right now associated with simulations, but there's no reason this can't be expanded to other things. Typically, when you run a simulation, you specify the behavior of the simulation in a text file, a parameter file, right? And one of the things that will be in there is the cadence of outputs, or a list of discrete outputs, right? So in theory, the parameter file that you use to run the simulation has all the information about where your data sets should exist in time space or redshift space, right? So that should be enough, right? And for right now, a limited set of simulation types, Enzo, Gadget, Owls, and Exodus 2. If you have the parameter file that you ran it with, you can say yt.load simulation, give that parameter file, and here you specify the type of simulation. So we do that, very little happens, but we do get some interesting metadata out right away that can often be useful, because this is all knowledge is embedded into the parameter file itself. So the domain dimensions, the left to right edge, things that you should be very similar from for loading a single data set. But we also have the initial time and the final time, whether it's cosmological, the box size, initial redshift, final redshift, and the total number of data sets. Or at least the number of data sets that should be there at everything run nominally, which always happens when you run a simulation. Don't ask clarification on that. So one of the things we can do without doing anything else is that the information about the individual snapshots that should exist are living in an attribute on this mysim object called all outputs. And all outputs is a simple list of dictionaries that will have time, file name, and optionally redshift. So I can do a little more list comprehension. And in fact, when we talked about unitful arrays earlier, I mentioned that datasets have this ds.r, ds.arr, and ds.quan helper functions to make unitful arrays. So does this mysim object, right? So I'm going to do output time for output in mysim.allOutputs, and I'm going to make that into a unitful array with that mysim.r, right? And I'm also going to make list of file names. Do that, and then actually look at this my times thing. Back here it is. It is a nice unit array of all the times in megayears or in whatever quantity we might want to see. So a nice way to know what should be on disk if I run the simulation, I've saved it all there, and that's it. However, so I told a lie that no one could tell I was lying. Sometimes simulations don't go according to plan, right? Sometimes you want to output data every 100 million years, and it turns out you can't get 100 million years in a wall clock time before you have to restart it. So you have to cut it in half, right? Or, other reasons. So Enzo can also output data at sort of unpredicted times or times that are not foreseen. When things happen in the simulation. I'm sure other codes can do things like this, right? Or maybe you just didn't keep all of the data. Or maybe it made more than you expected, right? So if that's the case, and you don't expect a one-to-one mapping between the prediction and what will actually be there, you can add this find outputs equals true keyword argument. And then when we do this, we'll see this little bit at the top. It says checking 5 potential outputs, checking 0. It's looking for time and redshift dumps. And then it will say located, right? So it used this parameter file in the folder that only had 5. And it actually goes through quietly, turns its printing off, tries to load them. And if they work, it says this is an actual data set. So then now I have this mysim object with just 5 things, right? So in my all outputs, I'll have just 5, right? Now, what then can we do with these, right? So this isn't quite elevated to the level of a time series yet where we can iterate them. But we can call this function get time series, which will kind of magically recast this simulation object as a time series. And I'll explain in a minute why we would do that. Right, so we do that, and now we can say for ds in mysim, and then just go through it or do it in parallel. The reason we do it this way with an extra function is that get time series has a list of options, right? You may not want every data set. You may want data sets at very specific redshifts or specific times or with some time cadence. So if you click on the link for get time series, you can see there's lots of options. You can say, for example, an initial redshift or an initial time, and it will limit your time series to just the data that you really are hoping for. Right, so I'm going to run this again with this initial redshift, and now you'll see the previous one loaded 5 outputs, but I added this initial redshift, and now it only loaded 4 because one of them was before redshift 28. Okay, so now that I've got them, I'm going to actually do some analysis on them. I will loop through each one, and I will create a profile of density versus radius, and I'll plot. And this will take a minute because going through each one. There is the slow gravitational collapse of a primordial cloud of gas over time. And really the power of this is that we can do things like this in parallel. And as you'll see this afternoon, we can do things in parallel and regroup and rejoin, and we can still do things like making the whole plot in a way. So that's all I've got for this. And we will stop here and move on to the next thing. Questions, Avery?
I don't understand when we restricted it to 5 bytes. So you had asked for, you need to find the first MySim.
Mm-hmm.
That was,
Yes.
then it said all outputs and you got every file that you had on disk. Yeah.
That's right.
Like functions.
Yeah.
But now you say you can find MySim the same way, except now you put in the find output true, but how does it know it's true?
What's true?
Yeah.
So what it does is
You're not referencing.
So this parameter file.
Selection.
Well, so in the final example, I called get time series again without the redshift selection. So that's why we got all 5 again. Where the find outputs equals true, it will go through, the parameter file specifies what the naming convention will be for the data, and it will try out everything that matches the naming convention and verify whether it worked or not. And if it didn't work, it says that doesn't count. And it will only count the things that were loadable.
Why weren't all of them usable?
Okay, so they were loadable, but if I go up here, right, in this find outputs equals true, we found all 5, right?
But-
And then,
But wait, and those 5 are specified by what? What's restricting it to 5 out of the?
because in the sample data I provided, there were only 5,
Oh,
right?
in your data set.
In my folder of this sample data, there are only 5 viable snapshots.
Oh. Everything, so.
Yes, if you do,
Full.
yeah, so if you
They're actually
did,
not there.
right, so if you did find outputs equals false, it would predict them based on the settings in the parameter file.
I see,
And just say, this is what should be there,
I see.
and I'm gonna try it and it'll not work.
It's actually there.
Right, and the find outputs actually goes and checks. Any more questions before we move on? Okay, great.